Welcome to the Beyond Physio podcast. I have the ultimate and absolute pleasure of introducing Dr. Lara Heimann of LYT Yoga. And we're going to talk all about how she became a physical therapist first and then transitioned into an amazing career as a yoga, dare I say, guru online. And we're going to hear all about that transition and more. Very excited to have you, Dr. Lara. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you for having me, and I love that intro.
You're very welcome.
Bring you around with me.
So, I want to go into a lot of questions here. And my first question is, where did you graduate from as far as your graduate studies for physical therapy? And what led to this transition to become this yoga sensation online?
Well, online wasn't even really around then because I graduated a little bit long ago. But I graduated from grad school and then I moved to New Jersey. And after a few years, I went back and got my postgraduate in neurodevelopmental treatment.
Yeah.
And it was actually in New Jersey that I discovered yoga. I mean, I had probably, like many people at that time, this was in the 90s, thought of yoga as like sitting around and meditating and just thinking that wasn't going to be for me. But I joined a running club up in New Jersey to be able to meet people. Yeah, I ran in college for a year and a half. Yeah.
What was your distance?
Yeah, long 5K. Yeah. So I moved cross country and then begrudgingly track. I always felt like a little gerbil. But I loved cross country.
Yeah.
And so I came up to New Jersey and to meet people, I joined a running club. And one of the running club after one of the gatherings was to do yoga. And I was like, well, okay, I probably need to stretch. And it ended up being a power yoga, which was a derivation of Ashtanga. And so like you, I immediately was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is hard. This is
sweating.
It just kind of gave me the feeling of the runner's high.
Yeah, for sure.
But with the more kind of balanced movement patterns. And so I just wanted to learn more about it. But at the time, this is 1995, there weren't a lot of yoga studios around. So I just learned more from VHS and DVD tapes and books, and then I started teaching it. So I was also a fitness instructor at that time.
Oh, cool.
So in undergrad, I started teaching aerobics just to make a little money. And then I ended up teaching spin and funk aerobics and step aerobics. And so I'd already been in the fitness world teaching, so it was just natural for me to want to teach something that I loved.
Absolutely.
So I started bringing yoga into the wellness place that I was, and they didn't have any yoga there. And they actually were a little bit like, I don't think people are going to like that. So I called it flexible strength for the first year I was teaching. And then after the first year, like 50 people were in a class, and they said, you can call it whatever you want. Like, people are coming. So I just loved it. But after probably about 4 years of teaching simultaneously to working with brain injured or stroke patients, anybody with a neurological injury, I realized there were some gaps in what was in yoga and what I was teaching. I was seeing these, like I was telling you ahead of time, like I was seeing these stroke patients of mine and doing all this neurodevelopmental stuff with them and how much change and progress they made. And then my yoga practice just felt a little bit, I don't want to say stale, but it wasn't evolving.
Right.
So I started to just incorporate some of those neurodevelopmental things, like getting on the ground, doing all these wonderful movement patterns that are hardwired in us and that can help us actually improve our movement and bring more of a purpose into the practice, which really, I think that's what yoga invites us to do anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it was really seeing that. And at first, when I started incorporating it in my teaching, people were really like, what is this? Why are we on the ground? It was like, because usually in a yoga class, you go in, you might sit for a minute, ground, and then you start moving.
Yeah.
And this was like, no, we're going to lie down. We're going to kind of go through these things, and then we'll start moving, because we really need to prepare the body from whatever you were doing in your daily life and whatever you've done for many years in your daily life. Like, we have to kind of unpack some of the habits. And it became, at first we were resistant, but then people loved it. They were like, I feel so much better in my life. Because to me, yoga is more about that invitation of being more aware and awake and bringing that into your life. So the practice is on the mat, but it's really the life that you want to lead. That is like, how am I speaking, moving, etc., behaving?
Right.
And then, I got a kind of small following, and I had my daughter, And I stopped teaching publicly, and people started calling me like, can you do some private, please,
yeah, exactly.
or whatever. So I started private groups.
Wow.
And then it just became very big in my local area. And I realized like,
you're on something.
I need to do this in a bigger way.
Yeah.
Because I would go out of town and people would be like, I don't feel comfortable going to another yoga class. Like, I feel like I'm going to get injured. And I thought, well, this is not, and this is when I also realized that yoga teachers were not being educated about the body, and yet we're teaching about the body, and that must feel really awful for them.
Yeah.
So I developed a teacher training, and then I thought, well, if I develop this, I'm going to have to open up a studio, so I have a place. So it just kind of, I often say I was a reluctant entrepreneur.
Yes.
I followed what was needed and then just opened things according to that. And then once I was doing that, people from different parts of the world were like, I really want.
That's amazing.
I want to take your training. So I started online classes and then the online training. And so that's where I am today.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a great story, actually, Lara. And I think what really fascinates me is that you took this amazing body of knowledge and expertise, you applied it to fill in a gap, which is very entrepreneurial. Mm-hmm. And you've now seen a lot of success from that. Yeah. Did you ever think that you would get to this point where you'd be going from PT to yoga sensation?
Oh my God, I love you. No, I did not. I think if you had asked me 25 years ago, would I imagine that I would be running a company that had something to do with PT, but was much more, I would not have imagined that. It really, I kind of just, it was step by step for me.
Yeah.
And I know some people would operate differently. Like now I will create visions for where I want it to go.
Yeah.
But at that point, I was just, again, answering a need.
Yeah.
And then seeing simultaneous to that, all the changes with Medicare, all the changes with insurance, all the changes that were being, were really pigeonholing physical therapists to treat people as a body part and not as a whole human who has many things that contribute to this ailment or whatever they were coming in for.
Yeah.
And so all of those things I feel like contribute to where I am today.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Do you ever miss going back into the clinic at all, Lara, at this point?
No, I don't miss it. And I feel like when I left to have my daughter, I remember thinking I'm going to be on maternity leave for like 2 months because I need to work.
Yeah.
I know what I do know from the beginning is I always loved working with people.
Yeah.
And I loved that sense of just purpose.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to lose that.
Right.
So I felt like I'm going to be a working mom and I'll figure this out.
Right.
But then when people started coming to me, I was like, this is actually kind of nice. I can do it around my schedule.
Exactly.
So I mean, like the first number of years before I opened the studio, I would schedule it like when my husband could watch my kids or my kids were in school.
Yeah.
And so that freedom, once you get the taste of freedom.
Oh my goodness.
Even though, as we know, as business owners, there is a lot, there's a trade-off. Like
big time.
You trade off, the kind of ease of like going and working 9 to 5 and having your insurance paid for and having vacation hours, but being able to leave the clinic versus when you run it yourself, there's freedom. Like I can decide when I'm going to come down and visit my mom. But I'm always going to be thinking about work and trying to move the needle. So, but I've never missed the clinic.
Yeah.
No.
You and I spoke about how once you're an entrepreneur, it's a lifestyle at that point. And so when you hear things like, oh, I'm looking for work-life balance, it doesn't really exist in this realm anymore at that point. It's like your entire life becomes about the business. It's not necessarily unhealthy. Mm-hmm. It's really just about, hey, this is what I'm about. This is my heart and soul poured into this company and practice. And so, I know that I'm not going to have a straight up 9 to 5 job, but I'm always on somehow mentally, physically, emotionally, thinking about how we can get things better. How do you think your mindset is right now as an entrepreneur?
I love that. And I feel like, my husband and I have gone back and forth. And I think over the last couple of years, especially with the success of the company, he's like, okay, I'll just not say anything now. But, he would be like, okay, we're going to go away and you can't work. You can't think about it. And I said, honey, isn't it better to have a job that I want to be thinking about?
Absolutely.
It's part of my spirit that is connected. I'm not like putting on a coat, taking it off and being two different people. I'm consistently myself and consistently joyful and passionate about this.
Yeah.
And yes, you always need to have your priorities. So if I'm going to have dinner with my family, I'm present, but that doesn't mean that after dinner, that if I feel like I've got some stuff that I need to get done, that's going to make me feel better, and the kids are doing this and you're doing, like, I should be able, I'm okay doing that. Like, to me, we have broken through a ceiling of this idea that, you know, once you get home, you shouldn't work.
Yeah.
If you're working and it's drudgery, then that's what you should investigate.
Absolutely.
But if you love what you're doing and it's like you can't get enough of it, I think it's just like reminding yourself that, there's all the passions in your life need your attention, and that's going to wax and wane. Sometimes your family will need more attention, and sometimes the business will. Yeah. But to me, it's like, oh, I'm so lucky to be able to do, and like
you get to do stuff.
Like, I get to do what I love. Like, it's like, you know, when people find their purpose, I think we know, like, this is my purpose.
Exactly.
I mean, because I wake up and I'm excited about it. So I think if you're not waking up excited about your job, whether you're a 9-to-5 or whether you're an entrepreneur, that's what you need to investigate. Like, you shouldn't be doing something that has a residue of drudgery.
Yeah. And I feel like to tag on to that, that's, I think, where a lot of burnout comes from. Alex Hormozi, I love, big fan of Alex Hormozi, but one of the things he said was that burnout is an emotional state. And I believe that. It's like, if you're not really happy in the drudgery that you described, well, whatever that's going to be, it's going to lead to burnout because you're not doing the things that are making you passionate about what you're doing. And, you know, if it's not what you love and you're not really invested in it, it's going to be really hard to get yourself up every day, day in and day out, to do that thing.
Yeah. And I think we also need to acknowledge there's a level of courage, and I'm not like talking like courage, like major courage, but like emotional courage, and some people are really uncomfortable with that. Yeah. It is much easier to not have that, like, well, where are we going to be in 5 months? Exactly. Am I going to have enough money to pay for this? Like, you know, so it's like having the courage to not go after something just for the monetary gain, but because you're driven by heart. And I think that that's really what will ultimately split the people who are going to stick with it. Because if you're doing it just for money, that might happen and it might not. Yeah. But if you're doing it from your heart, you're going to ride through those uncertain moments. Big
time. Mm-hmm. I was talking to John about how what I love about being an entrepreneur is getting out of complacency and being thrust into situations or challenges where I have to draw from a different level of thinking at that point. It's not just about, I'm just going to do this. It's like, well, what am I going to do? What do I have to become in order to solve this issue or this challenge? And that kind of stuff excites me. The moral courage, the courage to do that as well. And also the fortitude to say, listen, no matter what happens, I'm going to learn something from this. What's that going to be today?
Yeah. That's exactly it. Like, we'll try some things, and, you know, maybe we'll spend a lot of money on something that it didn't translate in the way. But I'm like, well, I'm not going to get caught up in that. What did we learn from that? Yeah. There's always something you gain. Yes. Even if there is a perceived loss. Yes. Because it's just, then you'll change your direction. Yes. I mean, I know when I was creating classes, I was drawing people who were pretty advanced in their practice. And then, so I was just giving them what I loved, how I practice, and they loved that. And then when we got more people, I had to realize, like, actually a lot of people aren't practicing at the same level, and I need to serve them as well. Yeah. So I think it's also being able to realize, like, what you might perceive as being amazing is not always going to be the same for everyone. And if you want to make this more robust, you're going to have to, like, think outside the box and also ask other people's opinions. Yeah. You know, because it can't just be like what you perceive.
It's funny. John knows this too, where, and I'm sure you go through this as an entrepreneur, where I'm the idea guy. So I'll just throw the stuff out, like, in a rapid fire, and like, no, this is why it's not going to work. Oh, okay. Yeah. Then I'll come back next week and just like throw it at them. But that's what kind of, I feel the passion of wanting to do that, because I see things from a very top level. And now I have to see that maybe this won't work this year, but maybe next year, Jerry, you know.
Yes. And I think that's something. Yeah, I'm the whiteboard person too. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an idea, and I have notebooks and notebooks.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You know, and I think that's what I think you have to have a level of creativity.
Yes,
to be an entrepreneur, because it's always looking at, like, what else can I be doing
outside the box too.
Yeah, it's not linear at all.
No,
but yeah, it is. It's always good to have people like, well, I'm not sure that's going to be feasible. Yeah, and then you just change the kind of production of it, but I think at essence it's always coming from that same vision.
Yes. Yeah. Now, when you were making that transition from physical therapy over to yoga, did you have any fears or concerns about, I don't know if it's going to work, but you still went and go ahead with it anyway? Or?
Well, the way I look at it is, I didn't really transition. I just added, right? So So some people will say, oh, do you do PT or do you do yoga? And I'm like, I'm looking at movement.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at like how movement is affecting you. And is it affecting your energy? Is it affecting how well you move, your choices?
Yeah.
Maybe that movement caused you pain. Well, is that pain really because of the movement, or is it because of, the lack of movement somewhere else? Like, so I use everything that I've learned.
Yeah.
And so it's like a new identity, whereas I'm both of those things.
I love that augmentedness.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have also talked about how this whole body approach to looking at movement, looking at solving human movement issues. You want to talk about some of those things? We talked about nutrition, we talked about sleep. How about from your perspective now being immersed in yoga?
Well, I always, to me, we know the brain is the CEO.
Yes.
And the brain is taking in information and it's really filtering that and then deciding what that information is. So it's an opinion. And so I like that's what's so exciting is to really uncover, like, why is the brain getting that opinion? Is that because you've done this repetitively and it just ignored it for a long time?
Right.
And now it's sensing there's danger involved because it's overused? Is this because, yes, you don't know how to breathe well and you're holding a lot of tension and that's translating to the brain as like, I'm in danger? Is it because, you're not taking care of yourself internally and eating well and hydrating and sleeping? Is because you are miserable in your relationships and that you're carrying that because our body is a vehicle and it carries everything.
Yes,
it carries how we breathe, how we move, how we digest, eliminate, how we our immunity.
Right.
And it also is carrying our emotional state. And so I did a podcast about this and I say Descartes, we won't really totally blame him, but in a way we will, because he was the one that really separated body mind.
Yes, he did.
And set up this duality that is very, very present in our modern medical model. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm always looking at is let's totally understand that these are interrelated.
Yes.
I wrote my college essay getting into Duke about the mind-body connection before I even realized it. Because I was running in college. I was running my senior year in high school, and my brother and I ran cross country together. And he said to me, "Hey, we're done with our last meet. Do you want to run this marathon? It's like in a month." And I was like, "Sure." So, we had never run over, 10K.
Oh my gosh.
And so I think probably trained and maybe ran 12 miles.
Wow.
And then we ran this marathon. And I remember, and of course my brother ran it in under like 3 hours.
Of course he did.
Because he's like a genius, body and mind.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, and I remember the t-shirt we got. It was the Greensboro Marathon. It was like,
oh my gosh, okay.
Mile 24 was this vulture and it's like on the trees and one says to the other, this is a really good place to be. And it's like these little runners are like barely making it. And that's kind of how I felt. But I remember thinking like, what is that? Like, I'm young, I can do this. My mind is what's telling me I can't.
Yes.
But and then so I went on to write an essay about that before I really even had ever looked at any Eastern philosophy or any understanding of mind body. Mm-hmm. And so that should not be taught out to people. Like that's not like we should be teaching that in.
Absolutely.
That how
at every
you
level.
Think, feel, and move are all connected.
Yes, absolutely.
So I guess that answers your question.
In many ways.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like, especially with the PT model currently, you go into like how that's affected medicine too, where people aren't getting the intentionality from either their physician or from even the physical therapist to be able to direct their movement any better. And because they don't have that guidance or that inner compass on how to do that, they're really kind of lost out there. And, they're suffering with the shoulder pain. Maybe it's caused by the hip, but they can't equate the two because they're just not, sort of thinking about it in that way. And that can lead to other more global issues too.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's, unfortunately, I feel like physical therapists are so equipped to educate, and yet that part of it has been taken away. And like they don't get enough hours, they're not getting compensated for that. But it takes so little to tell somebody that your shoulder is actually the victim of other things that are not performing well, that are not balanced. So we need to look at beyond the shoulder, and don't think of your shoulder as this problem.
Yes.
So I think that's the other thing I like to teach people is don't identify an area. And I always dislike this in PT when we would say, the bad knee, the good knee.
Yes.
I was like, the knee didn't do anything. Why are we calling it bad?
Just the middle guy there,
Oh my gosh. and so, and in DT, we would always say the affected and the less affected, because even if you had one side of hemiplegia, it's always affecting the other side in some way.
Right.
And so I think that's how we have to think of the mind and body, the two parts, the lifestyle, the health, the wellness. Like, you can't just, go out and go to the gym for an hour and then come home and eat junk and yell at your, family. Like, it's like, it's all connected. You're not going to heal and improve your fitness and your wellness if you're not looking at all the different aspects of your life that contribute to that.
Absolutely. And we actually even tell clients too, right, John, where it's like, listen, you're coming in for this shoulder thing, we'll call it for now, and you've got other things going on in your life that I can do everything in this hour here, but I can't control what's going on in the other 23. So if you and I don't get a handle on keeping you accountable to these other factors, I can do what I have to do to blue in the face. It's not going to help you very much long term. So can we get on the same page together to say and address these things, and then approach this as a whole big picture kind of thing?
Oh, I love that. It's like, it's teamwork, because you're not coming. It's the whole idea of facilitating versus fixing, right? You're coming, and I'm gonna give you some input of that you might not be aware of,
right?
That like frozen shoulder, like, all the different things that could be involved in that. It's not just like your shoulder isn't moving and let's work on that. It's like, well, how do you overcome that signal?
Yes.
And again, hydration and all the other things too, right? That contribute. So I think it's empowering for the client to get that too. So they're just, because it would kind of suck if you like have this thing that you're suffering with and you think, oh, I've got to wait till Monday to go to my PT and they're going to move it around and it'll feel better. And then I got to wait till Thursday until they do it again.
Exactly.
But I don't really know what I'm supposed to do in between that can contribute to me.
We definitely have a lot of people that come in here and they're just they have their mindset on what PT is, and then they come in and they're like, why did we do all of that? Like, why are you looking at my squat when my shoulder is the one bothering me? We got to look at the whole picture here. We got to look at everything that's going to play into the range of motion that you need to do whatever you want to do.
And there's, for people out there, there's a lot of people who I see who've gone to PT for 2 years. I'm sure you guys see it too.
For sure.
And then I'll just kind of look, y'all do what you're like I'll look at their squat and they're like, why didn't they look at this? So when you go to people like the two of you, and hopefully many more PTs are doing it, it should become the norm. That should be like, this is the high quality that everybody should be looking for.
Right.
If they're just looking at the prescription, whatever that marked was your issue, then that's not enough. That is not enough. That is just one little part of the whole puzzle.
And how many times have you and I and John, how many times have we gotten prescriptions for sciatica and like, oh, it's in the front of my thigh, and I'm like, you're not even in the right area. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah. That's why people will bring in all their diagnostic stuff, and they're like, look at this, and I'm like, you know what? That is not. I could look at it, but I'm going to look at it from a fresh approach, because that is telling us something, and I could go in, and mine could look worse than yours, but I don't feel any of this.
Yes.
Exactly. So I'm more concerned about what you're feeling in your daily life and how it's impacting you versus what your scans are telling you. Yeah, we need them. They're certainly helpful, but do people get absolutely paralyzed
big time
with this, like, I have a cervical herniation,
or bulging disc, or
I've I had a woman write me yesterday, I have osteoporosis, should I do this? I'm scared to do anything. I'm like, you need to move. First of all, you're going to be okay. Not moving would be
even worse.
Right?
Exactly.
So it's like, we need to take away the fear, and yes, we need to recognize the body is amazing, its capacity, but we have to help. We have to help through education, and education is not cherry picking these parts.
Exactly. And unfortunately, with the current clinical model out there, we know that PTs are seeing anywhere from 3 to 5, 6 patients at the same time, and it's really sad that they can't share that knowledge that they do have. They want to share with their clients because of that sort of model. And then they're getting sort of like that traditional approach, is that the hot pack, the cold pack, ultrasound, and I can't believe these things are still actually in practice.
I know.
And then their patients are still in pain. And so they're not getting any benefit. The patient has a bad taste in his or her mouth because of that. And now they're coming to see us and saying, well, nobody even looked at that.
I know, and physical therapy is losing its credibility.
Absolutely it is.
And what's so sad is we know how hard PT school is, how much we learn. And how much, if you go to a good PT school, which most I'm sure are, that they're teaching you to look at the whole system. And but then you get out into this world of insurance, and it's all that is stripped away.
Big time.
And so it's really unfortunate for our industry.
It's definitely a lot of education that needs to go into the community, the society, that you're kind of getting what you pay for, in a sense of, if you want to spend a lot of time to maybe get a little bit better, you can go this route. But there are other options out there, and you can definitely benefit from that significantly.
I had a yoga studio, and I would say this all the time, because yoga, it's similar in many ways in that you could go to really good quality and you're going to pay more, but then someone down the street is going to be $5 drop-in.
Yeah.
And the consumer, how are they going to know the difference? How can you articulate the difference in a flyer? You can't,
exactly.
right? They're going to be like, I could get this for $5. And so some people would say, oh, I can do this for $5 and you're charging $20. And I'm like, yeah, but you're going to get what you pay for.
Yeah.
We have a coffee place in town in Princeton.
Yeah.
And it is the most popular, and it's like $4 for a cup of coffee. Now I could go to 7-Eleven and get 99-cent coffee.
Absolutely.
They're both coffee.
Yeah.
My expectation is this is going to taste like crap, and this is going to be amazing. And I'm willing to take the amazing because I know you pay for what you get.
Absolutely.
And it's absolutely the same across all these industries.
Yeah.
And it really, and people also have to look at long term. Why are you not investing in your health? If you don't realize your health, the absolute pricelessness of it until it's gone. And boy, you don't want to get to that place.
Exactly.
And my first job out of grad school was in working with very, very involved. It was a rehab clinic.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to go in orthopedics, which is you're saying. And I remember walking out being like, I will never take anything for granted. These people are stuck in that wheelchair. They're going to go up to their room. They're there for a month, and their lives have been changed.
Yes.
And I'm walking out, and I'm going to go teach yoga or fitness, but I will never take for granted. And so I had that glimpse. Well, I wish everyone knew.
Yeah.
You could think about, everything you're doing now is setting you up for later.
Yeah.
And we don't have that sustainability kind of inkling that is, in all the things we do in life.
Absolutely.
The way you eat in your 20s is it's going to add up to how you feel in your 40s.
Absolutely.
And it's so you do need to pay attention.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. Perspective is always a big thing that I carry in my life.
Yeah.
So I don't like to get too high or too low on anything in particular, because perspective wise, you can always compare it to outside world. And I think we don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but social media shows a whole different side, the best of the best. And then everyone thinks that's how their life should be.
Yes.
When there's good and bad in every day of everyone's lives. So
absolutely.
You just kind of roll with it and know that things tend to work themselves out in the end.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Let's go talking more about LYT now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the transition, John.
Yeah.
What I love about your method is it has 3 phases: reset, renew, and redefine. Yeah. Very similar to our Move, Excel, Inspire method.
Oh,
so we have a 3 sort of approach, and actually very similar methods. Can you talk more about that so our listeners can understand that?
Yeah, so it has a very specific blueprint.
Yeah.
Just like I think any practice that has staying power, you need to kind of have something that is predictable and something novel. And so the predictability is this blueprint, and it could be you have a 20-minute class, you have an hour class. Even in a private, I'm kind of going through some of that. So the reset is coming in off the streets, looking at how we can reestablish more of kind of this starting place, which is neutral spine, neutral pelvis. What is that? I call it the triple S, which is, the primary curves of the body. This is your ideal posture. Ideal is, or optimal posture, whatever you want to look at it. It's a spectrum. It's not a fixed point, but it is where you are aligned so that your bones have the most amount of surface area and that you can then move in the joints that are made to move trillions of times, your hips and your shoulders, and you can do that well. So the reset is really going back to those developmental things that we did as kids, as babies. We come out, we're in supine, we roll over, or we're on our back in supine, then we roll over on our stomach and prone, we come up on all fours, maybe forearms first. And then we get into like what we call 90-90, which
right.
is a half kneel.
Mm-hmm.
And then you stand up. And it's like, okay, well, we did that. And then we left it behind. Once we got back kneel, right?
Exactly.
Which is cool. But the reason we did all that was we had to get all of our postural muscles or stabilizers prepared to move us around and stand up against gravity. And so we can go back to that because many people have weakened those postural proximal muscles. And so that's really what the reset is. It's really targeting, activating those proximal muscles. So everybody listening, proximal is like if you imagine a skeleton and then you start layering on the muscles, they're the muscles that are closest to the bones that have long endurance. They are very, very important. I talk about a door opening, and it's like the hinge of the door allows the door to open. So we would never think about like, you know, the door at all as being non-functional unless all of a sudden you open the door and it comes off the hinges. That would be really disconcerting.
Absolutely.
So we need that stability to create movement, to create function. And so a lot of movement just happens to move, and you move in whatever habitual way you've developed over the many years since you were on the ground. And so we go back to the ground to really just fire up those muscles again. And I did that because I saw in regular yoga, people would just come in and they'd start moving, and you see all of their movement habits show up versus retraining them here and then implementing them so that they could do it in life. So I kind of look at like the mat is the place we retrain.
I like that.
And then we go through like the first sequences or 2 sequences to start to mobilize more, to really refresh them, the joints, get those synovial fluid going, and then we do at the very end what I call the stream, which is repeating the sequences and maybe adding variations to them, because that the repetition is really what creates that hardwiring going into the very, you know, going into the hard drive versus the floppy disk, right?
Exactly.
That we really want to create this so it becomes a learned pattern. And so we repeat those sequences.
I love that. It's almost like you're also creating new habits for your system, your body to just take on now, hey, this is what I should be doing or I can do. Now the possibilities have increased as far as my movement repertoire and all that comes along with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. As far as like the not only do you have like this 3-step process, but in the background for your principles, you have physiology, kinesiology, and neurology. Is that what helps to make LYT also very unique in its approach to yoga?
I think so. I mean, we speak to it in some way because I talk a lot about brain mapping, which gets into the neurology, you know, and specifically like, so kinesiology, how we fold over. Do you just fold over with gravity? Are you bending in your back? Are you swinging your pelvis back? Or how do you actually learn how to hip hinge? I mean, 95% of people don't know how to hip hinge. I know you know that. Right? And why would you hip hinge with a neutral spine versus this very kind of, well, when your hands are on the ground and your knees are on the ground, moving your spine is that's a great time because you've got this wonderful base of support, you're closer to the ground, and it's a controlled articulation of the spine. Versus when you're on 2 feet and you just kind of flop yourself around, that is not the best place to gain spinal mobility. This is really a place to work on hip mobility and working well, because if your hips aren't moving we know up and down the chain, the impact of that. So but some people they've done that folding forward a million times. So I look at like kind of brain hacks. How can I teach them to flex at the hips and learn it in a different kind of approach that's like a novel thing for the brain? So I'll talk a lot about the brain loves novelty. That's why we have to mix up and change things up. And you know, we do all kinds of things on the ground that are a little different, and then we have some things that are, you know, the same. We always do in our Sun Cell 1. It is the half kneel in every time, because it's like, here is part of that developmental sequence.
Foundational.
And you know, in yoga, traditionally it's called Anjaneyasana. You go into a sinking deep lunge, which people think of as a very stretchy thing, and I'm like, you're just going into your passive restraints of your hips. That's not stretching anything except perhaps your labrum, and that's not a good thing to be. And of course that's what people end up doing. It's very passive. So I touch on all those things. Those are the big words, you know, the physiology, kinesiology, I use that in my cueing, and then I teach my teachers about what all those parts mean and how we bring that into our teaching that doesn't sound like you're in grad school. It
Right.
just sounds like every day.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that you also have even physical therapists taking your yoga training as well, which I thought was really great.
Oh yeah, so I will have PTs who like yoga and have like, wow, but then they find a yoga that is created by a PT and they love it.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of them will be like, oh, I think this training won't be that challenging because I know all about anatomy, but I'm teaching it maybe a little bit different than you learned in grad school, you know, and more like actually functionally applying it.
Yes.
Not just learning, you know, how we went through gross anatomy and then we did this.
Exactly.
But this is a real integration of that. So it's so great though to have PTs in there because they start bringing in the clinic.
Yes.
It's amazing because they've run out of ideas too. And feel really stale. So it's really wonderful.
That's amazing. Have you in your travels in Lara, have you ever taken that knowledge and gone to schools to like share this with them, and how receptive are they if you have?
I have some, and that is something we're interested in doing. I've taught like physical education instructors who are teaching in big school systems and just saying like, here's what you can do, because if we could get this into the school system,
oh my God,
how you learn about the body and like that would be incredible. It should just be part of that. You know, that should be one of the required classes that everybody has to go through.
Fully agree.
You know, functional anatomy and how to apply it. Because a lot of people might take anatomy, but then they forget it because it's not applied.
They memorize all the parts, but they don't know.
And it's like you know, and it's just like we know anatomy is great, but it's not totally that useful if it's not applied.
Absolutely.
And then once it's applied, you don't really have to be like, well, it attaches here to here. It's like, well, okay, that's great, but what else is going on there?
Exactly.
How is it stabilizing? How is it moving? How is it involved in the surrounding joints? You know? So I have done that, but I would like to do that more because a lot of these, whether it's I've done it with some personal trainers, but going into different schools, I would love to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's definitely like, it's funny. I was speaking with a physical education instructor locally to us, and he was almost mortified by the level of activity that kids are actually sort of engaged in now, especially since the pandemic, to where, and this I quote, I was particularly disturbed by the fact that one of my students didn't know where to run playing kickball. Where should I go?
Wow.
They really had no idea. So what he told me was like, listen, I've become like the old school PE coach almost, and we're just doing straight up movement stuff because they're not gaining any movement outside of the home. And even for those kids who are in athletics, they're not doing anything aside from sports. So they're not working on the fine-tuning movement patterns that you're also describing. So that's also a concern as well. Like they're just like going from 0 to 60 back to 0, and they're getting injured as a result.
And you wonder why there's also this total epidemic of mental health.
Oh my gosh, exactly.
And because, you know, for movement is what changes and grows the brain.
Yeah.
And so if kids are learning and yet they're not incorporating movement as part of that learning, you really wonder how effective that is on the processing in the brain, communication, because so much of, you know, organisms that move have a brain.
Yes.
You know, so it's like that tells you something.
Yes.
All right. So movement is what, and then like when we go through the developmental sequences, I mean, that is what grew our brain.
Yes.
And from an anthropological standpoint, when we really started moving and changing, that's what grew our brain to be able to, you know, people think of eating meat as the thing. No, it was the complexity that we needed in the movement patterns to be able to go and hunt that actually created the growth of the brain. It wasn't the actual meat itself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like we should recognize that movement is, again, like we were talking with body and mind, it is interlinked with learning.
It's essential.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Peter Attia in his podcast, I think it was an episode with Andrew Huberman, and he talked about they did a massive dive into the research to see what are some ways that we can actually deal with or prevent Alzheimer's. And the key thing here was movement.
Absolutely.
Exercise. It wasn't like drugs, coffee, whatever it is. It was just exercise.
Yeah.
And that was for me mind-blowing, how integral it is to our existence and our mental health.
Oh, it is. It's that, I mean, because I just interviewed a guy who's an Alzheimer's expert as well.
Yes.
And it all comes back to lifestyle and movement.
Amazing.
Movement is huge.
Yeah.
But also, you know, in terms of habit formation with BJ Fogg out of Stanford. I mean, he said exercise/movement is the keystone habit, meaning it is so significant, it impacts all the other habits.
Yes.
So it's like, if you know this is the big umbrella that is going to change everything, why would you not do that?
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
It's like,
and it doesn't cost anything.
Right. I know.
That's the biggest thing.
We're in this thing that's made to move. And it's like, so it is a detriment to the kids. And I think back to when I grew up, it's like you just got home from school, you went outside, you moved some more. It was like constant movement.
Yes.
And it was like, it was just, I think and our energy changes,
yes, big time.
That's what I talk a lot about too, is energy.
Yeah.
And how are you feeling?
Yes.
Like if you're feeling like you are constantly tired or like foggy or something, like what are the lifestyle things? Like,
exactly.
Are you stressed? Are you moving? Are you moving regularly?
Yeah.
People also think, back to the 80s where you go to the gym for an hour and hit it hard and then you're done. But how about maybe just like do 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there?
All throughout the day.
Throughout the day.
Yes.
That has much bigger impact.
Big time.
That's what I always tell people. I'd much rather you get up every hour, every 50 minutes and do 10 minutes of movement.
Yes.
Then wait until the end of the day and go to the gym.
Exactly.
Like that is just, crazy,
it's
right?
really funny that you bring that up. We had brought this up years ago. We called it exercise snacks.
I call it that too. I call them stackables.
No way.
Oh my God. Yes.
So we would go on the bike while we were working, right, in the clinic, and then just like do a couple
Bang
calories,
some,
get your heart rate up a little bit.
Some pull-ups, some push-ups.
And immediately you're refreshed.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Immediately.
Yes.
It's like a combination of
it's your
espresso
espresso.
and getting outside, and it's all. And that's what's crazy is you can do it in 10 minutes.
Yes.
You can change the way you feel. I mean, this is another research by Amy Cuddy in 2 minutes.
Wow.
The the neurophysiological hormones like testosterone, cortisol, they can change in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that tells us that we're just walking around these machines that are so eager.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're eager to get into this more homeostatic, happy state.
Exactly.
And it doesn't take much.
No, right. And when we're finding things like, well, unfortunately, as you know, dopamine being the pleasure hormone, people are finding that sort of elated state in doing things that are not helpful for the body. Now it's trying to, how do we get people to shift their mindset to understand that it doesn't take that much to feel happy and feel good about yourself.
Yes.
It doesn't cost you anything to do that either.
No. Yeah. And I always, my big line is, the good news and the bad news is it's up to you. Like you really, at the end of the day, you can go see specialists, you can do that, but you can buy the treadmill, you can pay for everything, but it is up to you.
Yes.
And so,
100%.
but isn't that amazing too, right? That is up to you.
You have all the power.
Yeah. You have all the power.
Yeah.
Gotta use it.
So as we're closing here, Dr. Lara, we have some young entrepreneurs out there too. Are there one or two things that you would maybe have done differently where you are right now that might have maybe sped things up for you to see the success that you're seeing?
I wish I had that kind of, I wish I had an answer to that, because of course I always look back and I'm like, everything's going, as the way it should. That's kind of my disposition, but I do like to look and think I do think there's certain things that I think in hiring people or getting people to work with you, looking beyond just, I really like them, they want to work for me, really being like, what can they offer that they're very good at and that I need, and because that was something that I probably, if I had found a little bit earlier in some ways, and I'm talking even beyond 4 years ago, just like not just getting somebody that seemed really nice and was nice to work with and claim they had these skills, but really having like a little bit more of a filter of like, show me what you can do. And then I think that would probably be my biggest suggestion is making sure you hire people that they're good people, but they also have a really good skill set.
Exactly.
And similar passion.
Yes, exactly.
Because you need people that you're not having to pull up along with you because you're carrying so much already.
Yeah.
It's like somebody, like I used to say in the yoga studio, I would hire somebody and then I'd walk by and they're sitting there doing nothing and there's a trash can that's full. And to me, I'm like, I want to hire somebody where I never have to think, like that they're always a step ahead of me. They've already taken out the trash before I even saw it.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what you want, is you want somebody who's already doing the thing that you would have seen, and they saw it before you did.
Yeah.
And so I'm at that point now. I have an amazing team.
Yeah.
So that is a huge piece of advice.
Absolutely.
Once you start hiring people, make sure you're not just hiring your best friend or somebody you really like.
Yeah.
You want to like them, but
of course.
you want them to be able to really be in it with you as a team.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, don't be afraid to know that you're going to have to spend money to make money.
Yes.
I mean, that is just, I was probably more frugal at first with that because it's scary.
It is scary.
It's really scary. It's like,
same boat as you.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're gonna have to spend this, and I'm like, what? And so I'm sure I could have sped up some things by taking that risk, but I did it based on what felt comfortable for me, and now I'm more. And I've just grown that.
Your risk tolerance has increased.
Exactly. So I think those are the two things, is know that you're going to have to spend money.
Yeah.
Like they say, pay to play, it is so true.
Absolutely.
You can sit there and try and do it all, and it will just move like a snail.
Definitely, yeah.
So you either need to get people or spend money or do both to really move the needle.
Yeah, and you touched on so many great things there too, Lara. And the biggest thing for us has been making sure that the people are culturally aligned with our values too.
Yes.
And this is where we have found some challenges at different points where maybe like 80% of the things we were on the same page, but one or two things that were so key we were not. And that's what caused some challenges in the past. But I definitely agree with you where it's that team approach has to come first and foremost, and also filling the gaps where they can fill in a skill set that you actually require for your business.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that too, because I have had people who were really, really good at their skills, but would say things that were not, like you said, in line with the values that I have and that the company has. And you can't be like, the whole separate the person from the product. Like, no, they're part of it. And so, that's not the case anymore. But I had that in the past, and I've been like, is this an issue that I need to bring up? And you don't like to get in that. So you want to get all that up front.
Yes.
Ask them who they voted for. All that.
Exactly. Yeah. We've actually even changed the way we ask questions now, like saying these are the things that we really care about. Yeah. Tell me how you have done these things or what you do and that kind of thing, to say like, well, I've done this and this is what I've done. So, okay, so now I see evidence of us being on the same page about certain things.
Or like, what values do you live by?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes people have a hard time answering that.
Yeah, right. And that should be like,
do you even have values, right?
Right. And they're like,
kind of spit it off.
Right. And they should be able to say it from a place of like, what do I believe versus what do I want to hear?
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant to ask those kind of questions. I think that's so important because it also, I think humility is really important for people.
Huge.
Like, for somebody, I've worked with people before, like didn't own up to something or like made a ton of excuses. And you're kind of like, you know what, if you actually said, wow, sorry, I should have had that in 2 days ago, or that instead of giving me 10 reasons why you didn't, like I lose respect for that, because we're all going to make mistakes, but just own up to it, or just say, I things happen and I'm really sorry, I'm going to get it to you tomorrow. I would forgive that in a minute.
Yeah.
But when you say 10 different things, I'm thinking, no. Like, you got to be human.
Exactly.
And like, I'm going to be human with you if you're human with me too.
Absolutely.
Which is acknowledging when you didn't kind of, like show up in the way I wanted you to.
Yeah. And along the lines there, like even as a CEO founder of my companies, one of the things I've told at our annual planning meeting was that I'm not as important, or I'm not more important than anyone else in this room.
Yeah.
I don't strut my walk around. I don't do like my CEO walk in the room or anything like that. I really find value in learning from everyone around my team, and everyone's got really good minds. So I draw from that as well. And so it's like, listen, like talk to me like we're just, on the same level.
Yes.
Because I need to hear things too. And there are things I don't want to hear that I have to hear.
Yes.
But my team has my trust. I'm not going to like, bash them or anything like that. Like, I need to hear this, and I need to apologize too if I made a mistake.
Well, and that's the key to success, is that you're positioning yourself not to be like, yes, man, but like, you know what, actually, I don't think what you're doing is going to be best for everybody.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, I definitely don't have that issue. People, and I think you create that culture.
Yes, exactly.
I just happen to be holding the baton that says CEO.
Yeah.
There's nothing else about
That's
me
all it is. Yeah.
that is like that at all. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Thank you so much for being on our show today.
I'm so honored.
I still learned so much from you, Lara, so thank you. Where can people get in touch with you or follow you? And by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, podcast, please follow Lara Heimann on Instagram. She's got a massive following. She knows her stuff. But how can they follow you? Find you?
Yeah, so Instagram is a good place if you are on social media, and it's just Lara, Lara.Heimann. I'm sure that'll be in the show notes. But you can also look up my website, lityoga.com. LYT is an acronym because we know we love acronyms, and it stands for Lara's Yoga Technique. But I would always say things like, you want to feel lit up when you at the end of a class. That's where all systems are going, like your body, your mind, your spirit, your energy. And so then when we were coming up with this name, and I knew it needed to be simple, I said, how about lit? And everybody's like, yeah. And then it was funny because we started using it when we were working on the trademark, which took 2.5 years.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And everybody was saying, oh, I love lit. I'm like, this better go through because they're loving this name more than I am. And fortunately it did, but that's another thing is I think as we could go on and on, but as entrepreneurs, we never realize how much legal stuff we have to do as well, which I would never have known.
Yeah.
It's so important to protect this product, this amazing opportunity that you're giving people, and you need to protect it. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, lityoga.com. And I have a podcast as well called Redefining Yoga, because redefining is not changing. It's just like looking at it from a different perspective.
I love that title.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
You so much.
Thanks again, Lara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.